With that, we will call to order the City of St. Louis Port Authority for its regularly scheduled board meeting held on April 10, 2025. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Kay,
Aye. Present.
Commissioner Liddy.
Here.
Commissioner Mason,
Present.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Chair McBride.
I'm present. And the first item we'll take up is the approval of the minutes for the meeting held on March 13, 2025. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. I'll second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Liddy,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Chair McBride.
Aye. And the minutes are approved. Next up is Resolution 25 PT 7, recommending execution of the 5-year option term for a lease with SCF Lewis and Clark Fleeting. Susan, are you going to walk us through that?
Sure. Good morning. SCF, as you all know, was their parent company was bought out by Ingram, and Ingram is continuing in there to lease all the 5 or 6 leaseholds we have with them. This one started about 5 years ago, and it has 5 5-year terms. Usually we do 10 and 3 5s, but this one's now up for its second 5-year term. And the street down kind of the center of the picture is St. George Street. And there's some funny linear footages in the meets and bounds, but they basically have about 869 feet. And you can see a fleet there right now. And that's been there for well over 30 years, that fleet. So Ingram's a good tenant. They have a bunch of leases with us, and we'd like to, when we negotiated the lease 5 years ago, we mapped out the whole payment schedule. And so that's what we are adhering to. And it's in the exhibit to the resolution. And so their first year's annual rent would be of this first option period, be about $60,000 a year. So staff's recommending approval of this 5-year option term for SCF/Ingram.
Very good. And I just so I'm clear, the name of this tenant did not change with the Ingram purchase, correct?
That's right, because we negotiated with SCF before Ingram bought out the parent company, and the parent company had about 5 or 6 kind of subsidiaries, if that's the right word, one of which was SCF Lewis and Clark Fleeting. So yeah, that's the name on the lease, SCF Lewis and Clark Fleeting.
Right. Okay. That's the tenant that remains unchanged. Okay.
Right.
Any other questions on this resolution?
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Liddy.
I was reading it. I'm just kind of curious why the annual increase in rent is only 2% over the course of the whole thing, when the 10-year average CPI is 2.9 and 20-year average is 2.4. And in section 7 of rent, it says, third line says, such rent as the same may be adjusted from time to time as specifically set forth this lease. Why are we charging less than the rate of inflation? And can we adjust it to the rate of inflation?
When we negotiated the lease 5 years ago, as I said, we mapped out all the lease rates. And so we'd like to honor that. At this time, we do have a number of leases with them. We have a big municipal river terminal lease change coming up, and we'd like to kind of negotiate everything at that point. So for now, we feel that we should stick with what we agreed to when we first signed up with them, or when we first started this lease. And we generally, Charlie could speak to this, but we don't necessarily follow different, we talked about when we first started renewing the leases about following CPI, and there's an industrial one and things like that. And so we just kind of went with, it was 2% when we first started negotiating lease rates. We felt the leases were, could earn 3%, so we changed that a few years ago. So it's not really following CPI. Not that it's CPI is a bad thing, but over many negotiations with our tenants, that's kind of what we've settled into.
Okay, I appreciate that information. Thank you.
Well, and just for more background, Commissioner Liddy, this has been a decade or decades long process by which Susan and the rest of staff have increased the lease rates on the riverfront from well below market to market. We've done surveys across other port districts across the United States and have done a admirable job of raising these rents, and there's still more work to do. And I think one of the issues you raise is the next step in this process, but we are certainly have been vastly increasing the revenues from the Port Authority over the last 20 years compared to the 20 prior to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Anything else on this resolution? I'd like to acknowledge Alderman Cohn and congratulations on Tuesday night. We appreciate everything you do. And you were locked up, but I'm sure there was something self-deprecating that you were going to tell us.
Thank
In any event,
you.
I
I'm
will,
still recovering, but happy to be here, continuing the good work.
I could only imagine. At this time, we will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 25 PT 7.
So moved.
Second,
Properly moved and seconded. May we have roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Cohen,
aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Liddy,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Chair McBride.
Aye. And the motion passes and the resolution is approved. Next up is Resolution 25 PT 8, recommending that the BPS approve a up to 1-year permit to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for access to certain property. Susan?
Yeah, the picture, when it comes up, is going to show a couple of lots that are city-owned, that are east of the old Mallinckrodt chemical plant, where a lot of the uranium was processed for World War II atomic bombs. In those days, Mallinckrodt was not terribly careful with how they got rid of stuff they had processed and didn't need. A lot of it went into the Destrehan Street sewer and on into Mississippi, and some of it is still lingering in the ground, maybe. So this is the second permit that the Corps has asked us to give them through BPS to continue to look for anything that glows pink and green in the dark. And so we came before you about a year ago for the prior permit for the Corps to inspect. And so they would like to continue to look, and we'd be happy to recommend that BPS allow them onto city property to do that. So the purpose of this resolution is to allow us to recommend to BPS to give them a permit to come on city property and look for any contamination that might remain. We don't think they're going to find anything, and that's certainly our hope, but we want them to look as much as they want.
Absolutely. Do you know what methodologies they're using to perform this investigation?
Actually, no, I don't. Do you?
I think they're drilling sample wells and taking topsoil samples. I don't have a specific engineering methodology, but the intent is to restore the properties back to its original condition once their sampling is complete, unless there's something that needs to be removed and remediated.
Gotcha. Okay, I think we all have some idea of the history that St. Louis played during the development of the atomic weaponry in World War II through Mallinckrodt and others. But this is one of the leftover issues that we're still combating even today. But any questions for Susan or the staff on this resolution?
I have a question. Did you say that they conducted testing about a year ago, or did you say you brought it before us about a year ago?
I brought it before you about a year ago, and they've been conducting tests since then.
Okay. And you said since then they haven't found anything.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Susan, it's Shane.
Hi.
Hey, good morning. I can read the map, but it doesn't really have street names on there except for Wharf. Is this near First Street in Monroe? That street that doesn't even exist because it's been teared apart for the last 10 years?
Monroe is further south, I
Is
believe.
it?
So
Okay.
the McKinley Bridge is across the top of the picture.
Okay.
It's immediately south of McKinley Bridge.
Okay. I'm just bringing up Monroe again because it is in the Port Authority District, and it literally half of the street is gone.
Okay, Monroe at First Street.
Monroe, it's between First and Second Street.
Okay. Do you know why the street department's torn it up?
The business owners over there told me that the streets department hasn't done anything to it in decades. People keep coming over now because the asphalt is gone, the cobblestones are being stolen. Water or MSD was out there at some point in time a couple years ago. They still have cones out there, but nothing's been done from a resurfacing perspective. Like, semi trucks are still going down it and tearing it up
Okay.
even further.
Okay, we can look at that and maybe talk to the director of streets at some point.
It's really bad.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's see if there's something we can take a look at in that regard. And any other questions or comments on this resolution?
I just have a quick question.
Thank you, Commissioner Liddy.
Once the Corps of Engineers says that everything is fine and all that, what are the plans for this land? Any idea what the future holds for it?
If it's city owned and somebody wants to develop it, they would have to talk to us. We would lease it. It looks like the flood wall kind of runs right through the middle of it, which makes it hard to do you're not going to do anything within 20 feet, 25 feet of either side of the flood wall. We could probably get a fleet in there if somebody comes to us and wants to fleet there. But it's not, great property to redevelop. If any of the businesses there wanted to expand on that property, we'd be happy to lease it to them, but the city doesn't sell riverfront property. So it would have to be a developer saying, I want to do X, and we could talk to them, see how we can make that happen if we
Okay.
thought it was a good idea.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Very good. Well, at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 25 PT 8.
So moved. Request to use previous roll call. Can I do that?
You may. Is there a second?
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded with request for previous roll. Is there any objection to that request? Hearing none, the motion passes and the resolution is approved. All right. Now we'll take up Resolution 25 PT 9 relating to approval of the fiscal year 2026 Port Authority budget. Charlie, as you identified as the individual walking us through this, is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. This is an annual resolution request that we have. It covers projections it covers the current fiscal year, the projections for the current fiscal year, and a budget for FY '26, which begins July 1st of '26 or of '25 and ends on June 30th of '26. The port is divided into three, for lack of a better word, cost center. The first one is the Port Development Fund, which captures the leases up and down the river that you took up one of them today on George Street, but there's roughly 40 to 45 leases that we have up and down the river from River de Pere to the Chain of Rocks Bridge. The on the first budget page has the Port Development Fund. We're projecting lease revenue of $2,527,000 in FY '26, and you can see the comparative numbers to the left of that. It
Hello?
continues to go up. Yes. Did somebody have a question?
I don't think so,
That was
Charlie.
a mistake,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, no problem. It continues to go up because we renegotiate as Susan suggested on George Street. The leases are generally structured, and this is not 100% structured, but generally structured to have a lead-in of 10 years and then 3 5-year options where we can mess with the rates. We've been doing that based on what tenants are willing to pay. Basically, we started the process. The city had an ordinance that that basically said the minimum rate is going to be $18 a linear foot. I'm talking about for fleeting here. I think that has escalated to closer to $20 a foot, but we're getting currently about $75 a foot. And that's every 5 years, that's adjusted to what we think would be the current, based on the market and things like that. We feel it's fair for the Port Authority, the city, and for the tenant. We're also restricted by I said 10 and 3/5. We're restricted. We cannot go above 25 years. I think, and that's a city charter item. But anyway, in FY '26, we have $2,527,000 budgeted for those leases. Carry over a 731, and that's the bottom of column 2. That's 731, showing total revenue of $3,258,000. The expenses are outlined right below that. City internal services, $25,000. The professional service is for our consultants in Washington and Jefferson City to keep us abreast of laws that impact the Port Authority and the city in general, and to advocate when we apply for grants and things like that. The 230 is an escalation from the 210 for just as a contingency. Then we have a wharf cleaning of $300,000. That this money is transferred to the street department annually. Port District infrastructure, $400,000. Our own contingency at $200,000, and SLDC support of $1,500,000, totaling $2,655,000. We have that's a net income of $603,000 when subtracted from the revenue. the budget allows for a transfer to our city terminal fund to help with the debt reduction out there, up there, and a rollover projection to FY27 of 303. And if I'll just flip over to the second page and then I'll answer any questions to the best of my ability after I take care of page 2. Page 2 has the other two, for lack of a better word, cost centers. The Port Improvement Improve Wharf Fund basically captures the parking revenue for the arch area, the downtown frontage, and its geography was defined by the Board of Aldermen. It runs from Biddle Street to, I think, to Shodo, east of Leonore K. Sullivan Drive. There's parking on the levee when the water permits it, and that's where we generate our revenue. We're projecting in FY26 $125,000 of net revenue coming into the port. The carryover of 481, you can see that's the bottom number in column 2. The projections for 25. Total revenue 606. Budgeted 400,000 for maintenance, repair, and other, and hope to transfer over 206 to the following year. The third center is the municipal terminal, and this is a little bit different situation than the leases I described before, which are between the city and the tenant. This is a lease between the city and the Port Authority. It's a nominal amount, $1 per year, and then the Port Authority subleases to a tenant. And I think Susan mentioned SCF in the earlier. They sold their interest to Ingram. Ingram is now our subtenant, and I think you approved that transfer when it occurred. The revenues from the terminal stay within the terminal, and we in the FY26 budget, we're projecting 330 as our carryover amount from the prior year. We have lease income of 400,000 and royalty lease of 200,000. Royalty lease is our participation in the tonnage that moves through the terminal, and we rely on accurate numbers from the tenant to give us that. In a good month, they might send us a $20,000 check. I think the price per ton is at about 25 cents currently. And we also pick up a little of the fleeting. If they have fleeting where they have revenue from fleeting, we participate in that also. And that's the royalty component. We have federal and state grants of $8 million. The $8 million is a grant that the Port Authority applied for, and it's being managed by the terminal tenant to build rail between, to lengthen the rail in the terminal and actually extend it down to, I can't think of their lease, Susan.
Tyler Street.
Tyler Street, yes. They talk about mile trains, and this would accommodate the mile train, and which actually, I guess is a big incentive to use the rail system. It's designed for that. The trains are extremely long these days. The other thing we're doing with the 8 million is going down and investing in I think 3 million is set aside for that rail project in 26. The other 5 is what we hope to be invested in the trash the
South Refuse.
South Refuge project, whereby we have designed a new South Refuge facility to the tune of about $1 million. And now we're ready to start building it. I think, Susan, you can correct me, but we hope to start late maybe in October. This fall, we hope to start with the construction of that. The program non-governmental that 600,000 is matched for the terminal rail project, and it will be paid by Ingram. So in our negotiations with SCF/Ingram, they agreed to pay the match on these grants that we procure. Susan does the hard work in procuring the grant. Then they improve their facility and pay the match. And there has been no issues at all for ever since SCF took over that. The prior tenant there, we had to split that cost with them. So that was a big improvement when we negotiated that. On the expense side, we have interest on a loan that we borrowed to should I close my door?
It's not distracting, Charlie. You can go
Okay.
forward.
Okay. So the interest is on a loan that the Port Authority borrowed to leverage EDA money that went into the docking facility at the terminal. And we borrowed $4 million when the project started, and we have now paid it down to 1.5. I mentioned that transfer from port development to the terminal is 300,000 is designed to pay that down faster. Although we do have a current rate of a good current rate, it's a little less than 3%. We just don't like debt on our books, so that's the whole purpose of that. We have depreciation expense of $850,000. We have a consultant expense of $50,000. Public improvements of $5 million. And those public improvements, again, are South Refuge improvements. These are, this grant is being done on city-owned property, so we do not record that as an asset of the Port Authority, but it will be improving a city facility, and I don't know how the city will treat it, but that's not really our concern. We expense it on the Port Authority's books. And then maintenance, repair, and other 120,000. Don't have anything in particular, but things come up during the year. Now there's some funny stuff on the bottom of this one. What we do is we take that income and adjust it for capital improvement expenditures, which will be at the terminal site. So that'll be a negative cash. We add back in the non-cash expenditures, which are the $850 for depreciation. We subtract out loan principal payments, which are not normally an expense, but affect our cash. That's 600. That would be 300 through normal depreciation, normal amortization of the loan plus the 300,000 prepayment. And then the fund balance transfer from the port development of 300,000, which we talked about before, leaving a rollover to the next year of 430. And I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Charlie. Any questions for Charlie on our budget for the fiscal year 2026?
I have some questions.
Proceed.
It's regarding the wharf cleaning. I see here you have budget FY, is that 2025? How is that budget developed? How do you put that together? Is that from the streets department? Do they send you numbers, and do they send you an itemized list in terms of what they do down on the riverfront? And how do you set that budget?
Good question. I think what I know about it is we deal with the budget division with Paul Payne at the city, and he suggested playing with that number this year, as a matter of fact. But I'm not aware that that's been changed. You may have found because the city has to do some work on flood wall repair. We usually give the city this to hose down logs and stuff when they come, when high water comes and leaves debris behind. They bring down high pressure hoses and hose the logs back into the river so they float downstream. But
so you're not sure where that number comes from?
So, Director, just quickly, I'm sorry if I can briefly
Recognize President Richardson.
Thank you. And Charlie, thank you for the update. So this is like a variable that's plugged in from the budget director to help cover the overall maintenance costs, as Charlie alluded to. And then they do report out on how those expenditures happen throughout the year. But overall, as they're developing their annual budget from the city level, they submit a request for a certain dollar amount from the Port Authority. So it's a variable that is inputted and directed from the city itself, and not just an imaginary number that we make up here at the Port Authority at SLDC. So
the reason why I asked is because I've mentioned in several of our meetings about the trash that has been down on the riverfront in areas that I know that they're supposed to be hosing down. And I mean, $300,000 is not a number that you sneeze at. That's a large amount of money. So as I see this in the budget, that riverfront should always be clean. And then there should be no trash down there, particularly when we start up our cruises and we have our guests coming to visit our city. There's been a number of times that I have raised questions about that. So that's why I was concerned, because that money comes out of our budget and it goes to the street. So somebody, in my opinion, is not monitoring that properly from the street division, and there should be no trash on our riverfront.
Understood, Director Mason. And we will connect on a couple things now I have with the streets department. One is the Monroe Street project, and then also ensuring that the wharf is clean. But also, as we're looking at the Port Cochere and clean up at the Port Cochere as well, ensuring that we clear up any debris and trash that's there too. And we've been working with the Director of Operations, Nancy Cross. Obviously, there's a transition happening now, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and raising those concerns that have been voiced today to the new administration around partnering with the Port Authority to ensure that that is addressed, as you stated, and be accountable to us because we are investing resources from our port leases into the streets department. So I appreciate that information, and we will bring more data back to this body as we get that moving forward. Charlie, did you have anything else to add regarding the comments?
No, it's a number the budget division has requested to be 300,000 for the last 10 years, I think. Before that, it was 200 and it escalated to 300, but it goes back a long way, the history on this.
But I think to Director Mason's point, though, is having some accountability around how those funds are being spent, I think will be very helpful for us as we approve the expenditure of that funding to support streets moving forward, and ensuring that we're being good stewards of those resources is important. So that's something that we will track closer, Director Mason, as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget for fiscal year 2026?
I have a couple questions, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed, Commissioner Liddy.
On the Port Terminal Fund budget, there's one for federal state grants. I asked Susan this before, with all that's going on in Washington, is there any way we can separate federal and state grants into two separate line items? So we know what might be in jeopardy? Because federal, state, I mean, how much do we get from the federal government? How much may be cut out from the federal government? That type of thing. I think, see what I'm saying?
I do. Charlie, can we break that into two different line items?
That's yes, we can. It should be noted, though, that a lot of what the state gives us is federal money also.
Oh.
It's passed through, yeah. But they do have their own, annually we apply for capital. I think we're limited to roughly $1 million, Susan, is that right?
We're limited to 2 asks for 1 million each from the pool of money that the state legislature collectively gives to all the ports. So every year we ask for $2 million worth of state grants.
Okay. The other question is on the Port Development Fund budget, line 5755003. STLC 1520 mark release debt service. It goes from 373,000 down to 0. Why are we so lucky to go to 0 now?
You know, the history on
Is that a
that
question?
is, I didn't quite hear everything you said, but I think it's the 1520 Market Street.
Right. It goes from 373 down to 0.
Correct. So when SLDC moved into the 1520 Market building, we took up a good portion of the second floor, and there was like a build out cost, let's call it $5 million, that the city had to borrow to do the improvements to the second floor so that we could occupy it. That bond issue was, the debt service was funded through the account that you're looking at. It got refinanced a couple times, has a decent rate, but it was paid off in FY 25, and that's why it shows 0.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Very good. Any other questions or comments related to resolution 25 PT9? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve resolution 25 PT9.
So moved.
Second.
Previous roll.
Been properly moved and seconded with request for previous roll. Is there any objection to that request? Hearing none, the motion passes and the resolution is approved. Thank you, Charlie.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next up, we have reports from our lobbyists for state and federal. I'll let Chris and Jackie decide who wishes to go first.
Jackie, I'm happy to go first, but what would you prefer?
Go ahead. That is great.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Nice to visit with you again. Let me start with the big picture in Washington, and then we'll get down to some specific things we're working on for St. Louis. Big picture, of course, we've had a lot of activity in Washington under the new administration. We're watching very closely tariffs. It's unquestionable that if the tariffs that the president has been proposing actually go into effect, the impact on trade on the Mississippi River will be potentially very significant. Of course, we saw yesterday that the president paused or suspended the tariffs that he announced last week for 90 days. So we have a reprieve for 90 days, but we'll see what happens. He apparently will be negotiating deals with various countries over those 90 days. And so maybe this threat will go away, but it's something that we're all watching closely. Turning to more local things that we're working on, we continue to pursue and look at various opportunities to generate some federal funding for various projects. We're working closely with the EDA, the Economic Development Administration, and we are regularly interacting with the Missouri delegation, in particular, newly elected Congressman Wesley Bell, who of course represents the greater St. Louis area. With regard to the Coast Guard, we continue to have good and positive discussions with the Coast Guard as they transition some of their facilities to the riverfront, which has been a priority of the port for some time. And we're hoping that this ultimately leads to the Coast Guard mooring some of their vessels along the port's facilities on the riverfront. We're also working with the Coast Guard Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that supports the Coast Guard, and working with them to have an event in St. Louis in the fall. Again, part of our ongoing, if I can use the term, charm offensive with the Coast Guard. The admiral in charge of the 8th Coast Guard District, which includes St. Louis, is Admiral David Barata. He's based in New Orleans. As I've reported before, he has been hugely helpful in a lot of these initiatives that we've been working on. As is typical in the Coast Guard, his term as the commander is ending in June after, I suppose it's roughly 3 years. And his change of command will be in mid-June. And both Susan and I plan to be there in New Orleans for that change of command. Roughly simultaneously, the captain of the port in St. Louis, Captain Andrew Bender, is leaving his post. I believe the date is June 13th, just a couple of days before Admiral Barata leaves, and Captain Bender is being replaced by Captain Brandy Parker. And I won't be attending that, but I believe Susan is attending. And obviously we like to attend these events and continue to build and maintain our relationships with the Coast Guard leadership that has jurisdiction over St. Louis. The other news I want to report is that late yesterday, the president signed an executive order on the maritime industry writ large in the United States. It was entitled Restore America's Maritime Dominance. It's 15 pages. It has lots of things in it. But as it relates to St. Louis, there are two things I want to mention. One is that the president is calling for a review and enhancement of the Maritime Administration's Port Infrastructure Development Program. That is a program that provides grants to ports all around the country. And the president is calling for a potential expansion of that program, which could ultimately be very helpful to St. Louis. His executive order also calls for the establishment of what the executive order refers to as maritime prosperity zones. And we don't have all the details yet, but the apparent intent is to create investment incentives and tax incentives for companies to develop waterfront facilities with a maritime purpose. And the executive order says that these maritime prosperity zones are going to be designed to be similar to opportunity zones, which were created several years ago for non-maritime projects mostly. So details to come, but if these maritime prosperity zones are ultimately created, it could provide an opportunity for Susan and her team to attract additional maritime tenants to the riverfront. So that's my quick update and report from Washington. Glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions from our lobbyist in the District of Columbia?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Susan.
if I could add to what Chris just said, the U.S. Maritime Administration's Port Improvement Project funding, that's been an ongoing thing, and consequently, Chris has been very helpful in setting up meetings with me and the people that run that Port Improvement grant program. So I've met with them 3 or 4 times now, and once we've cleared the South Refuse site and have a tenant, we're going to apply for one of those maritime grants to build whatever the tenant wants to have a maritime, have a port terminal at that location. So if the tenant says to us, we want to build a dock or we want a rail spur or whatever, it will be in their lease that they would pay the match, and we would try to garner as many grants as possible. And talking to the Maritime Administration is going to be one of our first initiatives. So thank you for that, Chris.
Yeah, and Susan, I would just add, it's early to know for sure, but we may well be able to combine PIDP, Port Infrastructure Development Grant monies, with the benefits that may flow from these maritime prosperity zones that the president says he's going to create. So we may be able to have a doubly attractive options for folks to come invest at the port, but remains to be seen.
Outstanding. Well, it sounds like a lot of opportunity in that regard. Thank you, Chris. All right. Ms. Barget, what do we have going on down in Jefferson City?
Well, good morning, everyone. We have, after today, we'll have 5 weeks left in Jeff City before the legislature adjourns. I think I told you all last time, and it is still true. Everyone is getting along. They're functioning well. So it is a very different Missouri legislature than last session. There's still some very big topics that need to be address that they plan to address in the next 5 weeks. The House just passed the department budget bills for fiscal year 26 last week and sent them over to the Senate. So the Senate will start working on those bills next week in their committees. They have until May 10th to pass that. It's the constitutional deadline. So they will start work on that next week. Our funding for the Waterways and Ports Trust Fund, where we get funding through, is sitting a little bit over $14 million right now, which is great. We like that number. We were trying to get it a little higher, but Susan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we either get $1 million or $2 million out of that for St. Louis Port specifically. Not specifically impacting you all, but just so you all know, there's a lot of other big issues that need to be discussed, but the two that will kind of take up the majority of the bandwidth over the last 5 weeks are changes to both Prop A and Amendment 3 that were passed by Missouri voters at the end of last year. Prop A is the minimum wage and paid sick leave issue, and then Amendment 3 is the abortion issue. So I assume in the next week or two, bills will get brought up and debated in both chambers, specifically the Senate, that will eat up a lot of time discussing what changes they actually will make or not to that. Specific to the port stuff, you all have heard me talk about for a year now, trying to address this change that we need made to the Waterways and Ports Trust Fund to make sure that the St. Louis Port can access appropriations from the state. We have successfully had those bills voted out of all committees unanimously. We voted them out in a terminology that we call a consent bill, which means that they are non-controversial. They do not carry any fiscal impact to the state, and it prohibits anyone from adding amendments to the bills. And if you recall last year, that's kind of where we got really stuck, is because there was another port issue that got tagged onto our bill that kind of ended up tanking it at the end of session when everything else went under as well. But we have both of those bills are consent and crossing chambers, and we have successfully tagged those on to five bills so far. So we have it on just a general state revenue fund bill, a transportation bill, and then a number of other port bills. So if things continue to move and function, we are in a really good spot to get that done. Obviously, I'm not pessimistic, but I'm also realistic that with 5 weeks left and some very controversial things coming up, anything could happen. But we've got it tagged in so many places that if there's an opportunity and things are moving, I think we're in a good spot. Over the past couple weeks, we've had a couple other issues that have popped up as well. Over on the Kansas City side of the state, a couple bills have been introduced that I call the Kansas City Port bills. They dramatically increase ports' powers and authorities. It was introduced by the Port KC folks. It is not publicly discussed, but I personally believe that they're trying to utilize it as a tool to help out with building a new Kansas City Royals stadium, kind of using it in that realm. It's that you won't read that in a newspaper anytime in the next couple weeks, but I eventually I think people will start reading between the lines on what they're trying to do. James that works with the port, the attorney, has been phenomenal kind of digging through some of that legislation for us. And because St. Louis City's Port Authority does not run in the exact border of the city, the language might pose some issues as it could potentially allow St. Louis County Port to enter into and start developments in the city without aldermanic or SLDC approval. So he has drafted up a couple amendments for us to try and make sure that we address that and there's no negative impacts to either St. Louis City or the St. Louis City Port Authority to address that. I don't think we'll have any issues making sure that we're not hurt there, but there also are some other good things in there with some of the expansion of the port powers that you all might be able to utilize as well. But again, I'm not really 100% sure what's going to happen with that bill because it is tied to that Kansas City Royals stadium issue a little bit, and that's also going to be a little bit of a controversial issue as well. With that, I don't have any drama to tell you about right now. Besides, you'll read about a bunch of VLT and intoxicating hemp issues that have been happening this week in the legislature. But I will keep you all posted on what happens budgetary wise and legislative wise as well. But if anyone has any questions, I will gladly answer them.
Thank you. Recognize President Richardson.
Thank you. And thank you, Chris and Jackie, for the updates. I would request, just for the edification of this body here, if you can prepare just a brief summary of the statements that were made today, specifically, Chris, as you outlined the Maritime Prosperity Zone information, if you could share that updates with the board in writing, that would be helpful for us to go through and respond to any substantive questions and opportunities that we may have as well.
Glad to do that. Will do.
Thank you. And then the second question I have, Jackie, you sent over an email regarding House Bill 939. And I know that's critically important for us to address. So please coordinate with Rob and Susan from our staff to work on a response to share with Senator May and Roberts as well.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
I have a question, and this is for Ms. Barchet. I think I'm saying your last name properly.
Yes, which is rare, so I appreciate it.
Some of the bills that you were saying that there should be no problem with it. They should be passed and get through. But just to say that they don't this session, will they be reintroduced or how does that work?
Yes, absolutely. So especially the St. Louis City Port fix piece. If for some reason we can't get this done this year, we will have a sit-down meeting with the governor, and we will have a sit-down meeting with MoDOT again and reiterate the importance of this. We have both Senate leadership and House leadership, the Missouri Port Authority Association, MoDOT, everyone is on board. They understand that this is an issue that needs to pass, and every year that it doesn't pass, that St. Louis Port is not receiving any state appropriations, when there is a legislative intent to make sure that we are receiving those appropriations. So yes, it will be reintroduced. I think I really, really hope that we can get it done this year. But if we can't, I think we are going to have some sit-down meetings and get some promises that we can make this one of the first two bills that are passed next session with an emergency clause, which makes it go into effect immediately to try and address this and make sure that we don't get stuck in the controversy that happens at the end of session. It is, and just to explain a little bit further, almost all bills are passed in the last 4 weeks of session. There have only been two bills that have been completely passed. It was the big crime bill with the state control of St. Louis Police Department and a major utility bill. And they were both top priority issues for the governor. Those are the only two bills that have been passed by the legislature and signed into law. And it typically is only major big issues that do get passed before that. But we've been dealing with this for a couple years now. So I do think that this is something that if we can't get it done this year, we will make sure that it is on the governor's radar, and we can make sure that he can help us out getting that done.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Anything else for our lobbyists? All right. Thank you both. We appreciate your times. Anything in open agenda?
Sorry. Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to give recognition to Susan for all of her hard work and Roland. It's a small but mighty team of two people that's managing our port. We remain fully leased, and Susan is continuously finding opportunities to grow the footprint of mooring opportunities within the Port District, working with developers, working to identify sites that need to be remediated, or have environmental challenges that can be turned into productive opportunities working with the federal and state level. She's done a tremendous job of also renegotiating our lease terms to ensure that we stay fiscally strong at the Port Authority. So I just, again, wanted to recognize Susan, as well as Roland Comfort, who is her right hand at the port, who is not always on the call today. I think I see him present. He doesn't get to speak all the time, but he does a tremendous job. And I just want to make sure they have the proper recognition for their hard work as we approve our fiscal year 26 budget and overall support of operations at SLDC. So thank you, Susan. Thank you, Roland, for all of your great work over the years and continued contributions to the city of St. Louis.
Here, here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, outstanding. Well, thank you all. If there's nothing else on our open agenda, our next meeting is set for May 8, 2025 at 9 a.m. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We have concluded our agenda and are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next month.